to hear from God, there is a God within the heart that does direct, but we have to figure out what language is being spoken. Is it the language of the mind? Is it the language of the senses? Or is it the language of God? You're like fine tuning in the old days of radio stations, you'd have to like, and then finally you can hear the clear sound of the radio station.
Raghunath Cappo, thanks for being here, man.
Thanks, Mitch. Good to be here. Good to see you.
Appreciate it. So yeah, let's just jump right in. I've been reading the Bible a lot lately, actually, and I was looking forward to asking you about the parallels between Christianity, the Gita, the Bhagavatam. As I've been reading it, I've just been seeing so many beautiful parallels. So I wanted to get your thoughts on all that.
Oh, sure. I definitely think here's my statement on it. I feel like I understand the Bible better after reading the Bhagavatam and the Gita. Do you have that same experience?
That's interesting you say that, actually, because I never read the Bible before. I started reading it like maybe 4 or 5 months ago or something, and I've just been going deep in, and I felt that exact thing, that as I've been reading the Bible, if I read it before I sort of read the Bhagavatam and the Gita, I would get it less, actually.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I feel like I can explain it, the Bible better. I feel like I can explain it to a open-minded Christian better. I can try to explain the essence of all of this and how they all tie together. And I can share. Yeah, I really feel like I have a better grip of it, and it's more approachable to me. It's not like sometimes people would think, well, it must be the opposite. If you're reading all these books, you're going to be really pushed away from Christianity. I was like, no, just the opposite. I feel like I embrace it more.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like one thing that I've been particularly interested in is the idea of the Trinity. And because talking to Christians, and even I've been volunteering at a church around here sometimes, and I talked to the pastor there a long time ago, actually. I talked to him there. And there's all these different, everybody wants to own the truth. That's what I've been seeing. And when I read the stuff, it seems to me like it totally harmonizes, and I could to me, it almost seems the same, not to offend anybody, but it almost all seems the same at the end of the day. But have you ever thought about the Trinity, or like how that fits in, or even been concerned at all with like?
Yeah, the Trinity to me is Father, right? It's God, the Son is the Guru, and the Holy Spirit, which is the God in the heart of everyone. And these are the three things: God, Guru, and the Paramatma, God in the heart. These are the three things that we also look to. We say that God is inside. We say, trust yourself. Sometimes even regular people just say, trust your intuition or trust yourself. And so that is Paramatma, the witness that is in every living being's heart. Then there's God the Father. And then there's, I always find that a lot of times Christians are, they're confused sometimes about their own theology. Is Christ God? Is he the Son of God? He said in one point, people will say he's God. At another point, they'll say he's seated at the right hand of the Father. So what does that mean? What's the distinction? They'll say, well, he's everything. But I find like the devotees of Krishna have a better understanding, because we worship the Guru as God. And sometimes that drives Christians crazy, but we don't see him as God, but we say the Guru can give somebody God. And we say that's true. It's just like the map gives us directions. The GPS gives us the way out of the maze. So the Guru is like a map, and he points, or she points, the way to God. And God is a separate entity, but we give so much respect to that Guru, to that teacher, to that which is Christ. Christ is like it, and again, it drives Christians crazy if you say God, Christ is a guru. But guru just means he's the teacher that shows you he points the direction towards God. And to quote the New Testament, love God with your heart, all your mind, all your soul. So this is that is bhakti yoga, and that's what Christ was teaching. Love God. We're not of this world. We're of a spiritual world. Your real wealth is somewhere else. And so to me, it harmonizes wonderfully. And even when you talk about things like heavens and hells and demons, these are all things that the Bhagavatam talks about. There's demons. There's ideas of heavens, places beyond this world. There's darker places, regions that are dark where there's pain a lot. But I just find that the Bhagavatam and the Bhagavad Gita gives a little bit more detail. Just like right now, I can see your room. I see that there's books in the background. There's a picture on the wall, but I don't have and that is your room. It's not like that's not your room. But if there was another vantage point where I could see, well, where's the bathroom? Where's the kitchen in relationship to this room? What's an aerial view of your home? Then it's not like it's different. It's just like a different vantage point. So for me, I never felt the Bhagavatam made me break my faith in Christianity, but it gave me other insight and other vantage points. We talk about heaven. Well, what's heaven? Heaven's a place. It's a temporary place you go to. You do some time there. In the same way, hell is not like you're eternally doomed to hell. Now, I wrote this in my book I don't know if you read my book, but there's a time where I'm at a Christian. Right, all right. There's a time I'm at a Christian meeting, and we were talking about the eternality of hell. And I was thinking, well, what kind of God would condemn you? What kind of loving father would condemn you eternally? Why would that be love? Like if I told my son, look, you screwed up. I told you to get home at 10, you got home at 11. You screwed up. Go to your room. You're grounded. Or how long am I grounded for? You're grounded forever.
Yeah.
Forever. And we're setting your room on fire. I mean, what kind of I understand punishment. We get punishment, but the punishment is to help us autocorrect in the future. The punishment is not to condemn. If the father condemned a child, that wouldn't be love anymore. That would be like sadism.
Yeah.
And so for me, the understanding of reincarnation and learning lessons and growing and evolving and doing time, just like we're doing time in a prison until I become rectified and I don't have to live in that prison anymore. I can become a citizen again. In the same way, we do time in the material world. We do time in a lower planet. We do time in a lower birth. Sometimes we may be born in a lifetime of pain. There's people who suffer tremendously in this lifetime.
Yeah.
And hopefully there's a correction going on, just like in the same way, if a person commits a horrible crime, hopefully when we send them to prison, they're not becoming better criminals. Sometimes they do. Sometimes a person goes to prison and doesn't rectify their behavior, but sometimes they realize, you know what? I made a mistake. I can't do this anymore. I have to change my ways. In that rectification, there's healing. In that rectification, there's early parole. In that rectification, there's a new type of freedom, but you must get rid of all types of blame. You cannot blame the warden for being in prison. You cannot blame your life situation for being in prison. You have to take full responsibility. I got here because there were some crimes I've done, and I want to get better from those crimes. And so in Bhakti, we accept that it's the same type of thing. I'm here doing time. I'm not trying to create heaven on earth. I can't. The actual material, and this is what I like about the Vedas. It goes into great detail about how your heaven on earth myth is not going to happen. We're in a temporary world, and we're trying to fall in love with the temporary. And therefore, the heart is meant to be betrayed and broken in this world. And we're supposed to invest our love in a higher purpose, in a higher service, in a higher being. And the material world is just basically a chance to grow. It's like going to university. So in that sense, I like the Bhagavatam because it gives a little bit more of a vantage point to the home that we're presently in the same sense I said. And that's the Bible. Again, I'm looking at your home right now, but it's a vantage point.
Yeah.
I'm not getting a clear picture. And I just feel like Vedic teachings give a very clear picture objectively. I'm not just saying that because it's mine over yours. I just say objectively, there's just more information there.
Yeah, totally. That's what I actually just recently read Stephen Rosen's book called Christ and Krishna. And I think he was actually a disciple of Prabhupada, if I'm not mistaken. I can't remember his
I know him well.
Name, but you do.
I know him well. He made me a devotee, Stephen Rosen.
Yeah, he said the exact same thing at the beginning of his book. Something like the Bible is basically an abridged version of spiritual literature, and it's kind of like a condensed thing that you can carry around with you. I almost feel it's such a great analogy what you were saying, and I've come to sort of think about it as like the whole heaven and hell thing in the Bible is just like this hyperbolic kind of almost metaphor for what you read in the Bhagavatam about kind of the enlarged picture of, okay, yeah, maybe it's not eternity, but it could be basically eternity if you keep making bad decisions over and over and over again for a long time.
That's a good point. And we see sometimes people, when they do make one bad choice, sometimes it snowballs into many bad choices. We've done it in this lifetime. I made a bad choice, and so I lie about it. And in that lie, I get caught. Now there's a bigger lie, and I have to tell a bigger lie to get out of that first lie. And so we can snowball these things, and we can see them happening. These wheels, it's like a snowball, exactly like a snowball, because snowballs roll. And if it's going down a hill, it can't be stopped, and it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And how do you stop a snowball is unless there's some type of intervention, like a wheel. How do you stop a wheel going down a hill? You throw a bicycle, you throw a stick in the spoke, so to speak. Yeah. And so Sri Guru comes, or the teacher, or the being that is delivering Vedic knowledge to you, and they throw the spoke of they throw a stick in the spoke of the wheel that's sort of running on autopilot and spinning out of control down a hill, just like sometimes you see a skier just like tumbling down a hill they can't stop. So it's the same type of way. Sri Guru comes and sort of just like, hey, stop it right now. There's an access point out of this. Yeah. Otherwise, this whole lifetime that we think is very long, 50 years, 70 years, 90 years, however long we live, is really just a moment in time. And then we spin off into another crazy direction. And that's what karma is. And that's another beautiful thing about the Bhagavatam. It zooms us way out of our own lifetime as so important. It makes us see our life as just a speck in the broader scheme of time. And that this whole identity that you have as Mitch and I have as Raghunath is just like it's literally a blink of the eye.
Yeah.
And so sometimes because people say this, like, well, how can you talk about karma? Don't you understand this young child died, or this person was in prison, inappropriately in prison and had to do time their whole life. Right. And they were born into pain with a painful body with chronic disease, and they suffered tremendously. And even though my heart goes out, according to Vedic teachings, our entire lifetime, even if we were to live to 95 years old, is literally a sneeze or an inhale or a blink of the eye in the bigger picture of time. In the same way, you could have been married, say, before, and it could have been a really painful marriage, or she was abusive, or you were abusive, or something like that, or one of you were an addict, and you were married for like 10 years. And you're out of it now. And now you're free. And now you've got a new wife or new husband. And you look back on that old relationship, and it's almost like a dream. You know what I mean? Have you ever been in a relationship? When you look back at a relationship, it's like a dream had taken place. Absolutely. It's hard to even sometimes my dreams are more realistic than an old relationship or an old job or an old apartment that I had. It's dreamlike. And that's because the Vedas describe this whole material world is dreamlike, meaning it melts, it fades. It's not solid. We're so desperately trying to reach for something solid in a world that sort of drips out of your hand, and you can't really clutch it.
Even last week.
Last week, even yesterday.
It all gets very hazy.
People sometimes ask me, like, well, why can't you remember your last life? I was like, well, I can barely remember yesterday. You know what I mean? What to speak of the trauma of birth, the trauma of going through the birthing canal, or being that, just like if you get in a car accident. Mara, my partner, had a seizure. And while she was in India, she's never had a seizure before. And I thought she was dying. It was quite traumatic for both of us, I think.
Oh my God.
But I said, and she was walking. She didn't feel well. So I said, sit down. I'm going to put you in a rickshaw. We were in a holy place in India. Put her in a rickshaw, and she started seizing. And I thought she was going to die. And I said, well, what do you remember? She goes, I just thought we were at the side of Govardhan Hill. And I don't even remember getting in the rickshaw. Wow. And that's the way trauma works. It's a special gift where it shuts out your memory. And people oftentimes get in car accidents and they say, I don't know what happened. I just remember driving and I woke up on this operating table. Yeah. So it's one of these things. It's sort of a gift that we don't remember, or maybe it would haunt us too much and stored in the subconscious. But previous lives, generally speaking, are not remembered.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean they're not there. It just means that the subtle body shuts down, probably for our protection. It gets stored somewhere, and it gets stored and manifests in phobias or proclivities in this life. I'm bringing things in this life from a previous life, a talent, so to speak. Why is that child so talented at art? Because they've been practicing it for lifetimes. Here's their subtle body has been passed, follows the spirit to their new gross body.
Well, what are your thoughts when someone says, all this stuff sounds great, but Jesus is the only way, and either you get on board with that, or I want to just say, like, I just want unity, man. Like, I wish everyone could just get on board with, like
that's the problem with preaching fundamentalism, and fundamentalists exist in every tradition. Although it's sort of woven into Vedic teachings. Like, you'll never see like Hindus boycotting Christmas. Like, screw these,
exactly,
because they'll say, "Oh, nice, they're understanding God," because woven into the actual teachings of ancient India is that there's a higher power, there's a higher truth. Different prophets come to teach us the ways, and so they're not against. You'll find it only in these Abrahamic religions, oftentimes, where we are the chosen people and we are doing it this way. And it takes it generally takes a Christian theologian who has some type of dabbling into the Vedas, and you'll see that in perhaps can't think off the top of my head, but Reverend Beatty Griffith, and who's the one I'm thinking of right now?
You mean like a pastor who's reading the Vedas?
Yeah, who's reading the Bhagavad Gita, and they can relate, and then they'll come up with these.
Oh wow, that's awesome!
Yeah, and it's not so rare anymore.
So know people like that? Have you ever had? I want to get your opinion on this one verse, actually. But have you ever had any good like conversations with somebody like that, like sort of interfaith kind of thing?
Yes and no. I think yes and no. I don't find anybody so much in like, for example, Rudolf Steiner was that way. Rudolf Steiner was Christian. He was the founder of the Waldorf community and the Waldorf schools. And he was an incredible, deep spiritualist. Or Madame Blavatsky from the Theosophical Society. Or there's a name that's slipping my mind. Mara, what's that Christian theologian we always quote? Richard Rohr. Oh, Richard Rohr for sure. But C.S. Lewis.
Yeah, C.S. Lewis.
And one more too. Anyway, very common. Thomas Merton. Thomas Merton. They all have some access into Vedic teachings.
Interesting.
And they find some type of common denominators.
Right.
And so it's not super common, but they have
some
to.
People are like, that's the devil.
Yeah. For most people. And so when you talk to people like that, get on board. Okay, you want to play? I mean, for most of those people, I walk away from.
Right.
But if they actually want to get into it with me, I'll be like, all right, well, your master says, I'm the way, the truth, the light. No one gets to the Father except through me. I get that. But Buddha also says, no one crosses the great ocean except through me. And Krishna also says, there's no truth superior to me. Everything rests upon me. So here we have three old, wisdom traditions, and their prophets or their gods or their avatars are all saying pretty much the same thing. Now let's get down to philosophy. Like, why? If I'm going to choose your book, why don't you just choose my book? Just because you're going to just yell, you're going to just make your statement louder.
Yeah.
Because Christ is the real thing. Well,
okay.
Yeah,
exactly.
Krishna is the real thing. I can say Buddha is the real thing. So now, why don't we, instead of finding the differences, why don't we find why don't we find the commonality?
Yeah.
They're all giving this type of wisdom. They're all telling you guys to renounce the material world. They're all saying there's something much higher. They're all talking about desires and passions and lust and greed and envy and anger. Why not see what these things have in common instead of trying to demonize the other team?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But if a person's a fundamentalist, they're not going to be able to get it. For a person who
No.
understands 1 + 1 is 2 and addition and subtraction, they're not going to understand negative numbers. They're not going to understand geometry. They're not going to understand calculus 2. You know?
Yeah.
No, you can't subtract 3 from 2. Yes, you can. It's called negative numbers. You know what I mean? So,
right.
In one sense, there's some, and personally, you don't want to disturb the minds of the faithless. You just let them do their thing. They're making some advancement. They're becoming pious. I find a lot of Christians, and even people who are like full on Christian, I find them good people.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like when I read this stuff, I would just say nowadays, I would just say, yeah, sure. I accept Jesus Christ. I really don't even have any problem personally, me like saying that, especially when I read stuff in, even the Gita, the Bhagavatam. Krishna seems so, everything is subsumed under him. And if there's an empowered avatar, then that sort of is almost no different in some sense than you still are going direct to God. I mean, that's how I sort of am seeing it lately.
I do it too, but for you to tell them that Christ is definitively the son of Krishna, that will blow their mind. So right, I always say, yeah, I am a Christian. I am Christian. I'm totally Christian. I gave my life to Christ.
Yeah, right.
I told it to my mom when I first came back from India. Right. But people have a hard time to understand that.
Well, there's this
actually
verse,
one God.
I read, yeah, right. The fact that there's one, and that's the whole Trinity thing. And when I spent a lot of time over the last couple of weeks just thinking about that, and I thought, you know what, I don't even have a problem with that either. Like everything is sort of subsumed under. When you read the Bhagavatam, it's just like it's pretty much all in there. Like you can find all these correlations, the word at the beginning, all that stuff. There's one great verse in chapter 9, verse 11. I don't know if you know it off by heart, but it's, the fools deride me when I descend in the human form. They do not know my transcendental nature.
Fools deride me when I descend in human form. They do not know my nature, which is imperishable and
the supreme
indestructible
Lord of all
or something.
Yeah.
The supreme Lord of all that be.
Exactly. Yeah, I thought that was a really beautiful verse that was applicable to Krishna. Of course, Krishna, and it's sort of seen in a different way if you talk about it in relationship to Krishna's pastimes, because it's talking in his case, it's like, well, you're just mistaking him because he doesn't have a material body, of course, in his pastimes. But if you apply it to Christ as well, I mean, he was pretty derided as well,
Sure. Also in the 7th chapter, I'm never manifested the foolish and unintelligent. For them, I'm covered by my yoga maya, by my maya potency. So here's Christ, or here's Guru, here's Prabhupada. And they're coming to deliver a transcendental message. And what did Romans do to Christ? They killed him. Yeah. Right? Prabhupada, they thought he was just some crazy Swami, But then again, you see now these Christians, it's like, I like that Ozzy Osbourne song. It's like, don't you understand, like that song After Forever by Black Sabbath? They said, Google that one up. But it's like, you're the ones that crucified Christ. It's like the fundamentalists are the ones that actually crucified Christ.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah. And so, like, don't you understand? You're the actual ones. You're hating everybody else. But if Christ was here right now, you'd probably kill him.
Yeah.
So in the same sense that you hate the Swami, you hate the guys who are delivering the message of God, and you hate them. Are you crazy?
Yeah.
So so Maya covers people from understanding who the great souls are. And when Krishna appears, Maya covers them to think Krishna is just very ordinary. But this world is actually not ordinary. This world is quite extraordinary. And the atheists is the same way. They have magic right in front of them at 24/7, and they just look at the world as mundane.
Atheists. Yeah. Have you ever had a good conversation with an atheist, or what's been your relationship with thinking about that? Their response
with atheism is like, I just like atheists. I just feel like you can't live it if you really believe that there is nothing, that everything that we have, any ethics that we have, is created from leftover Christianity. Then, if that's how you live, why don't you just stick a knife in your throat, or let me stick a knife in your throat? Because if in your worldview that we are just bags of chemicals sitting in an atmosphere of gases, and that's all we are. then what's the difference if I slice open your chest, or an 18-wheeler carrying chemicals, it has a chemical spill? It's the same thing. We're just spilling chemicals.
Right.
There's no right or wrong in your world of nothingness, where we're just creating meaning and creating love and creating empathy and creating compassion. Who cares? We're all chemicals.
Yeah.
Why? Since when do chemicals have feelings? And so you can't live that world, unless you're going to say, "Oh, I'm falling in love." What does that mean? Nothing even means anything in that world. And that's why a person who's actually a really deep thinker and they call themselves an atheist, they will lose their mind. Yeah. They will lose their mind because their life will have no purpose.
Yeah, there's no meaning. Yeah.
It's a sick existentialism, which will kill. And you're not even sure you're correct. That's the interesting thing. What if actually the theist is correct? The spiritualist is correct.
Yeah. It's so, I think you totally, nothing has any, not even your words or sentences or ideas or anything. It's all just totally meaningless.
It's all fantasy. It's all a fantasy. And you're worth just as much dead as you are alive. Mm-hmm. You're about to rot into the ground. You're falling in love. You're making that up. You're getting angry. You're fabricating that. You're following some laws of a land that have no meaning in the real reality. But the thing is, that's become your religion now. Mm-hmm. It's blind faith in so-called scientific thinking. Yeah, I say so-called because it's not every scientist believes that as well. Yeah. There's spiritual scientists as well. We say that bhakti is a science. A Christian could say Christianity is a science, but you have to enter. You can't just say, I don't, take this hydrogen and oxygen, put it together, and you make water. Yeah, well, I don't believe you. Well, you got to enter the laboratory, and I'll show you. So if I'm going to show you how to do the experiment, you have to enter the laboratory. You have to follow the rules of the scientific method also. So if I say bhakti is real, but here's what you're going to have to do. You're going to have to chant a certain way. You're going to have to control your senses. You're going to have to control your mind. You're going to have to read sacred literature. You're going to have to, you know what I mean? You have to enter the experiment to find out the result. Mm-hmm. And what we want to do is also, that's not science. It is science. To use any other understanding of science, and you're trying to understand things that maybe are not viable for you to understand with your limited senses. What makes us think that we can understand consciousness through the so-called scientific method? You might have to try a different method to understand consciousness.
Right. Yeah, exactly. That's all perfect. That's exactly my thoughts as well that I've been thinking about lately. I wanted to also ask you two more things. I think I got time for these two more questions. Pop culture, like modern sort of mainstream culture these days, the horror, there's a lot of horror, darkness, sort of evil imagery. What's your take on just, mainstream pop culture and all that kind of stuff, and how it affects someone? And are there sort of real, evil forces, real demonic forces sort of at play behind that stuff? And
I'm going to sound like a crazy Christian fundamentalist here.
Good, go for it.
But you got to be very careful what you consume. Not just through your mouth, but through your mouth, but all through your ears and your eyes. I personally think, this is going to sound crazy too, but I think there should be restrictions on what we watch. Mm-hmm. I don't think there's any benefit of consuming murder movies. I think it gives sick people good ideas. Creepy ideas. When I say good ideas, I mean creepy ideas.
Yeah, right.
To watch how to murder and to trap people in a basement or pornography, I don't think that's helping anybody become peaceful, happier. It's not good for our culture, our society. I think it's making sick people sicker. And to feed that, just for example, would you let a 4-year-old watch The Exorcist?
Exactly.
Hopefully, a person would say, "No, I wouldn't do that." Well, guess what? Your mind is as delicate as a 4. Why do you think you can tolerate it, but a 4-year-old can't? Mm-hmm. It affects the consciousness of everyone. Just like you wouldn't put sometimes you'll see a mom give a child junk food. And you're like thinking, oh, this poor little baby is going to eat this McDonald's French fries. This poor, child. Don't they understand how precious this child is? But as soon as a kid turns 15, they're eating junk food. So it's sort of like they're always precious. Our minds are always precious, and we have to treat it like it is precious. We have to be very careful what we consume, because it becomes they become meditations. That's what it is. We become what we meditate upon. So if there's a lot of evil in our thoughts, if there's a lot of darkness in our thoughts, first of all, it attracts darkness. It attracts darkness entities in this world. There's dark people in this world that carry around these thoughts with them. It puts us in situations where low bars are normal. We want to be around people that raise the bar of consciousness, raise the bar in how we treat each other and how we behave, and in our consciousness, in our way, our forgiveness, and our caring, our consideration, our compassion. Men are not all created equal. We're all spiritual beings, but you become what you practice. So if I practice martial arts on a regular basis, I'm going to be a lot better than a person that can't fight as far as fighting goes. If I practice music on a regular basis, you can't say we're created equal, because we might have had certain, in one sense, we're spiritual beings. But if I practice swimming, martial arts, music, I'm going to be better than the guy who doesn't practice it. So that being said, we can become different people, and we become by our choices. So but be very careful what media we consume. You got to be careful what art is on your walls, because we're seeing paintings or visions every day, and we're taking that in.
What do you think about somebody who says they're like sort of drawn to that stuff? Sometimes you hear people say that was like, they walk into an art gallery and they immediately sort of start wandering over to the dark. Oh, I like this darkness.
I'm also attracted to violence, illicit sex, bad, all types of like bad behavior. I'm attracted to it. That doesn't mean I should do it. Right. And that's what people think. Oh, I'm really drawn to it. Well, I'm so sorry you are. I'm sorry. It's time to rethink what we are being drawn to. We might be attracted to all types of horrible behavior. I'm attracted to drinking alcohol because my father's an alcoholic. Yeah. Well, that doesn't mean you should do it. Just see what happened to him. So yeah, we can be attracted to things. That doesn't mean we should act upon it, because those things end up creating us. Yeah.
That's brilliant. I'm so sorry you are. That's such a good answer to that.
I'm so sorry you are. Right.
Yeah, that's so good. Okay, my last question, and then I think we can wrap up. This is sort of more of just a practical one, because I've actually been thinking about it myself, and I was talking to a few people about it who are sort of tied into this idea of like, surrendering to God. But like you can sort of do all of this intellectually to where you're like, okay, yeah, I'm going to surrender to God, and that's so cool. And then, time goes by, maybe bad things happen. And then you're like, well, how do I actually do this? And then how do I actually discern God's voice from my voice and like make sense of that in my head? What are your thoughts on how to do that? And if you have wisdom on that. Yeah.
That's a great thing. So sometimes people, when they break a leg, sometimes when you break a leg, they have to like reset the bone. So the cast resets the bone, or else it's going to grow crooked and they'll never walk straight again. So after the resetting of the bone and after very careful physical therapy, that leg's practically speaking as good as new. So our thought process, sometimes we say, well, I got a gut feeling. Well, you got to be careful with your gut feelings. Sometimes your gut is just greed. Sometimes your gut is lust. Sometimes your gut is, people say, yeah, I just wanted to do it. It was great. I think it looked great. She looked great. He looked great. It looked great. I just did it. God was talking to me. You don't know if it's God or your lust, your greed, your anger, your envy. We could call it instinct. It's not. To hear from God, there is a God within the heart that does direct, but we have to figure out what language is being spoken. Is it the language of the mind? Is it the language of the senses? Or is it the language of God? And we do that by tuning into Vedic teachings. So if you read Bhagavad Gita every day, you chant japa on a regular basis, not even a lot, just one round of japa every day. And you read Krishna's pastimes on a regular day, then you're like fine tuning in the old days of radio stations, you'd have to like, and then finally you can hear the clear sound of the radio station. We know we're advancing in our spiritual path when we can tune in, and by my natural desire, I want to make good choices. Earlier, you asked me this question. We were talking about bad choices, and person was attracted to bad choices. And I could be saying, well, yeah, and I remember like as a teenager, it's like with sexuality, it's like, yeah, it seems inherent. I want to have sex with everybody. That's natural. That's very natural. I think this whole idea of marriage and you can only have one wife, that's crazy. We should be able to have as many as we want. I could say that, but that wasn't God speaking. That was my lust and my desires speaking. So after a while, after regulating your senses, regulating your mind, hearing wisdom literature on a regular basis, hearing the mantras, controlling your senses, then you start to realize, oh, this is just my lower passions. These is just my mind. This is just my tongue wants to eat something or smell something or enjoy something. It's just fabricated. And I know, and now I'm sharpening my intelligence from hearing the Gita, and I know that, oh yeah, I've done this before and it never made me happy. Oh, I get it. I'm being tricked. This is Maya. Right. And so soon you'll be able to distinguish as we get more on the path. No, this is Maya. This isn't Krishna speaking. This is Maya speaking. And that is when we start to walk without the crutches, walk without the cast. I don't have to hold on to those crutches anymore. I can just walk. I don't need the training wheels. I can just ride my bike now. So the training wheels is I have this regular sadhana. I'm hearing wisdom on a regular basis. And now I can start to trust my instinct. My instinct wants to do things that are good for me. My instinct wants to move towards people that will be a good match instead of me picking the same crazy guy or same crazy girl again and again. Oftentimes we find our life moving in these figure eights or thing's things where I pick the same wrong people, get in the same trouble. I overate again. I binged on stupid TV shows again. I feel like shit afterwards. I neglect my body. I have no sexual parameters. I'm not good with my finances, and I find myself caught up in these loops repeatedly. Right. So we start to regulate ourselves, hear wisdom literature, have a daily spiritual practice. And that is the surrender to God. That is surrender, just like they say, love isn't a feeling; it's an action.
That's powerful. So you're saying the actual practice of engaging in these activities, reading, the Gita, love. Reading the whatever it is you're reading, that is surrendering to
because
God.
That's what love is. But love is a sacrifice. So I'm going to sacrifice. Suppose I'm going to study about Krishna for an hour a day. That's a sacrifice of an hour. I could be doing anything, any type of crazy nonsense that I usually do. I'm going to sacrifice that time. Then I'm going to sacrifice a little time, 20 minutes in the evening. I'm going to sacrifice. And when I say sacrifice, it's sort of like I sacrifice $10 to invest in a mutual fund. I sacrificed it, but I'm hoping a better return on investment. Yeah. So in the same sense, I sacrifice my time, but there's a better return on investment of that time. And eventually, the mind, through the entire 24 hours, gets consumed with spiritual thoughts. It's not just at those times. It bleeds into the rest of the day. And that's called being Krishna conscious or God conscious or Christ conscious. We're just seeing God's hand in everything. And that's a very beautiful thing.
That's beautiful. If I could just get your opinion. Yeah, sorry. I just want to get your opinion on one more thing. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say, so if I say I love a woman, you got to say, well, what does that mean? You love her means you serve her. Love is an action. It's not a sentiment. It's not just done with your senses and your mind, right? A sentiment. It's done with your actions. You prove your actions by the way you behave. You could say, well, he loves me, but he has all these other girlfriends on the side. Well, that's not really love. Because he's saying he's committed to you, but he's not committed at all. So in the same way, real love, and that's why we say love is nuanced. And it's not just like and that's another thing I really appreciate about Bhakti path, because it shines a little bit more light on the path to God. Because in one sense, my mom says, well, I'm a Christian. But then another sense, when she goes to church once a month, maybe, and doesn't really understand the Bible, doesn't pray that much, but she is opted in Christian, But then you have someone like Thomas Aquinas or Saint Francis of Assisi. These guys have given their every waking moment and every breath to Jesus. So are they going to go to the same place, my mom and Saint Francis of Assisi, just because they say I believe in Christ? To me, I would say no. It seems like love of God should be nuanced. In the same way, I sort of love my mom, but I never see her. Instead of like a son that dotes on his mother and cares about his mother. Those are two different types of love. Yeah, I love my mom, but I haven't seen her in 10 or talked to her in 10 years. It's different. Love is nuanced. And in Bhakti, there's layers or echelons of love until you get to Krishna Prema, which is pure love of God. And this is like the highest thing. And I can't even say I love God, because if I loved God, I'd be thinking about God 24/7. In my sleep, I'd be thinking about God. It's almost arrogant to say I love God. It's saying we're working on being lovers of God. Truthfully, for the most part, we're lovers of the material world. We have faith in the material world. We still work in the material world. We think that material life will give us actual satisfaction to our heart. We think that people are going to, humans are going to, and children, and even a home is going to fulfill the God-shaped hole in my heart. The only thing that's going to fill the God-shaped hole in my heart is God. Nothing else in this world. Not drugs, not alcohol, not adventure travel. Not kite surfing, not the love of your life, not fame, not some economic plateau we're going to get to. Nothing will fulfill that God-shaped hole in the heart except God.
Yeah.
So for most of us, we say we love God. It's just words.
Right.
It's actually in the Vedas, it teaches there's actual stages, and you can start to notice them. You can start to notice as you pass through these stages, and that's sort of cool.
This actually ties in perfectly something I really want to ask you about. If you only have a couple minutes,
Sure.
even if there's no time to answer it, that's fine. But I've been reading the Tattva Sandarbha, Jiva Goswami's sort of foundational thing about how he talks about why the Bhagavatam is essentially like the best of the Puranas and actually is part of the Vedas and so on. And the reason why I wanted to read that was because I was thinking about the infallibility of Scripture. And when I'm reading Jiva Goswami stuff, it's like basically like, okay, this is really the only way we can know anything is by reading the Bhagavatam, because that's the foundation of all knowledge, because it's the ripened fruit of the Vedas, which is eternal knowledge. So all that to just based on what you were just saying, the fact that the Bhagavatam is sort of said to be an incarnation of Krishna, takes what you were just saying. It actually makes so much sense when you think about it that way. But I just wanted your thoughts on the infallibility of Scripture, and because sometimes people come across things and they think, oh man, this makes me feel weird. How do I deal with this? And reading the Bible, I have the benefit of being able to interpret the Bible in the light of the Bhagavatam, but
sure.
What are your thoughts on that, on infallibility of Scripture?
Well, yes, but Scripture's supposed to be meant to be taught by a teacher. Just in the same way we're reading like instruction manuals, and it's good to have a teacher to explain the instruction manuals to you, because sometimes it'll say something that just doesn't make sense to you. And I can say in my own life that when I was 22 and I got into Bhakti, there were a lot of things that really just didn't make sense. But now that I'm 59 and I'm in a different season of my life, I was like, oh, that makes 100% sense. But I know I couldn't see that as a 22-year-old. So sometimes a person who's sort of been around the block with an experience like the different seasons of life, they have a different vantage point to share. For example, if all you know is green bananas, but then there's a person sharing, well, no, the bananas are incredibly sweet and they're very ripe, and you got to peel the skin. The skin peels right off. Like, well, that doesn't make any sense. I've seen bananas. I've been around bananas. They're all green. Hard to peel. They're hard as rock. They're not sweet. So a person who's been around bananas can give you that, give you the lowdown on what that mature fruit is like. So it is good to read those books with the help of a devotee who's been on the path, And then the statements that sound sometimes even outrageous can make a lot more sense. Or at least you can say, you know what? Doesn't make sense, but I trust they will at some point. So I'm going to put this on the not quite sure shelf yet, you know?
Yeah.
And the not quite sure shelf, believe it or not, starts to become like, oh, yeah, that makes sense now. That makes sense now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yeah.
I started as a monk for 6.5 years. So to me, like the idea of being married and being serious about spiritual life was like, these guys can never be serious. These married people, you know what I mean? It doesn't make sense to me. And I just filed them and like, maybe someday I'll get it, but they don't seem like they can become saints, you know, because their lives are too enmeshed in the material world.
Right.
And then I saw like, I met kids that grew up devotees from childhood. So for me, I never liked them when I was a monk. Why? Because they seemed not so serious. I was dead serious when I was 22. And I found another guy who got born into this tradition, not that serious. And someone said to me, well, no, that's actually a very, very rare birth to take born into a devotee family. It's a very high birth, and you'll be amazed at what these people, you know, turn out to be. And but sure enough, I was finding them these guys were drinking and they were smoking and stuff like that. But over time, I saw no, actually, some of these people that grew up devotees, they're very, very evolved, and they just maybe had to go take a couple weird turns that I didn't have to take, and then they're locked in, and they didn't go through all the crazy insanity that I did. So yeah, there's certain things I couldn't necessarily understand at that time. And there's still things that I like, you know what? I'm going to still put that on that, reserve that on the show. And I think it's okay.
Really? You still have that, eh?
I think that's really understandable. I think it's understandable. Why? Because we're not talking about, I mean, I can say, listen, I can tell time, but I can't tell you how my iWatch works. I can't understand how my phone is connected to I can't understand it. That doesn't mean it can't be understood. It just takes a special mind to take this iWatch apart, you know, or Apple Watch, whatever it's called. And it takes a special scientific mind to understand those things. So if you are scientifically inclined, you can have fun with the Vedic teachings because it gets really nitty gritty. But you got to also understand the very first aspect of the Vedas, which is even the most intelligent people cannot understand everything. Why? Because there's certain things you cannot perceive that are not your senses are not equipped to perceive them. Just like a dog trying to see the color red. He will never see red. He just doesn't have the eyes to see red, even though red is real. So in the same way, an intellectual, an academic, a scientific-minded person can understand quantum mechanics, quantum physics, and he can understand that it's a multidimensional universe. I mean, I'm a dullard. I can't understand any of that stuff. I can't understand how an old-fashioned clock works for the most part. You know what I mean? I think that's quite fascinating. How do you do that? But the scientific minds can figure out that stuff, and scientific minds have much more access to understanding the Sanskrit language and prose and poetry, and understand a multidimensional universe, and understand that there is things that we can't necessarily perceive that is just descending from transcendental sound. So for most people, they're just like, nah, this is all kooky myths. But you know what? What do they know anyway? We don't know anything. If we grew up in America 500 years ago, we would never understand the animals of Africa, the animals of Australia. We would never. If you grew up in New York City in the 1400s, you couldn't understand what a kangaroo is. It's beyond our human conception, or a giraffe. It's beyond our human conception. So even on this planet, we can't figure out different life forms. We're discovering new species every year. You know, so there's so many things beyond our perception already. What to speak of if we don't have the lens to perceive things? Just like I was speaking of the dog. Or sometimes there's so many animals or beings that have no eyes. You know, like an ant doesn't have an eye.
Right.
You know, so how can it has a reality. It's just a limited reality. So the Vedas say, you know, Mitch, you are ant-like. Yeah. Because you're trying to perceive things that are way out of your range to perceive. And no matter how much I try to explain it to you, You'll just never get it. It'll never make sense to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. There's a comfort in that too, I think, actually.
I think there's a real comfort into knowing that you don't have to know everything.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty.
Yeah.
The analogy is of a child, and a father and a child get lost in the forest. The child, and it's getting dark out. So the little child climbs up the tree and says, "Oh, Dad, I see. That's where we parked our car, over there." So the child's not so bright. The child's not even, graduated high school. The father might be a PhD, but the father doesn't have the insight the child does because he doesn't have that vantage point. So Krishna gives us the insight to get out of the forest. It doesn't matter how intelligent you are. Intelligence can oftentimes just polish up your arrogance. You know what I mean? Sometimes we see academics or anybody. People are very beautiful. People are very wealthy. People born into any type of opulence. That opulence can be a hindrance. It doesn't have to be, but it could be a hindrance to their spiritual life. Why? Because it's connected to their ego. So someone who's just sort of simple, they might be able to just be humble about it. I don't know that much, but Krishna's given me this direction, and they have maybe some good pious samskaras or impressions in their consciousness from a previous life. So our academic or our intelligence is not necessarily a good thing. You need some type of discernment, and you need some type of sense control. The interesting thing is, if you have no sense control, then your intelligence becomes defiled. So you can be very academic, but you could have defiled intelligence. Just like there's people who are very, very incredibly smart, but what are they smart at? They're smart at, building bombs or torture devices or smuggling drugs. It's not like drug smugglers aren't intelligent. They're probably very intelligent. They're probably very mathematical. They're probably, you know what I mean? They probably could do anything in the material world that's legitimate, but they're doing something illegitimate. So intelligence isn't the qualification to follow God. Without the control of the senses, our intelligence gets defiled. And then it just makes poor choices. It makes choices in the mode of ignorance and passion instead of goodness and suddha sattva. Good questions. You brought out all these good points.
Thank you. Well, I really appreciate your time, and thanks for being so generous with it. And it was a great conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, my friend.
Hey, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more content like this.